How to create blackout Ripplefold drapery. Step 1. Gather your tools together. Drapery panel or fabric, scissors and cutting board, tape measure and ruler, marking chalk, pins, clips, pencil, paper, calculator, Ripplefold rod, extender hardware, master carrier. This is what the master overlap center carrier looks like closed and open. This is the C-channel decorative rod connector. That's what joins them together. I'm showing you 3 different Allen keys that are required, one for tightening the bracket on the wall, one for connecting the hardware, and the other one for attaching the top and screw. If you notice here, plastic carriers can get tangled very easily. Use a piece of cardboard and wrap them around to keep them separated. The plastic carriers need to go in the rod daisy chain style. Slide them into the rod in the same direction to keep the cord straight. Find a large table or work surface, put the carriers on the snap tape, and install both parts of the Ripplefold rod to ensure you have the proper rod and tape width needed for your window and before cutting and applying it to your fabric. Step 2. I changed the master butt overlap to a butt carrier. The reason I did that is because the master overlap carrier leaves a 7-inch flat area. I wanted one that joins together for a continuous ripple effect. Gather your design plans along with the dimensions of your window width and length. How these work is they've got this little lip on the top here and a little ring at the bottom, and this little ring part is what the snap tape snaps into. Doesn't matter which side, it works both ways. So when this goes in, there's these little feet that you'll see. I'll move it in here so you can see these little feet. Where it's open, you always want to have the open side of the carrier, which is this part of the carrier. Okay, you can see that there's a closed end, and then there's an open end. The open end you always want towards the front. Just makes it easier when you're trying to install these depending on how you're going to install them. But again, it's neither here nor there, it's personal preference. So this just clips into that like this. So how simple that is. Sometimes it might be easier to actually, once the snap tape is attached to your fabric, is that you snap those onto the snaps themselves and then clip them into the track. Try a couple of ways, see which one's going to work for you. But right now, this is how it works, and what you're going to want to see is this loop between. So you see where the carrier started, and on the butt carrier with the tape, and the tape is actually at different fullnesses. This one is an 80% fullness, so it's 2 3/8 between each snap. If you want a higher fullness, then there is closer distance between the snaps. Once you get to the butt carrier, in here you have to cut the tape because the snaps are very close together. And so you cut the tape, you use a stapler, staple them together before you install that on your fabric. Again, so as you can see, when it butts, you want it to have a nice little loop, and then there's going to be a dip down, then there's another loop, dip down, another loop. Step 3. Positioning the snap tape on fabric. In this segment, I'm going to show you how to measure for the snap panels. If you had to join 2 panels together and don't want to see the vertical seam, measure your panel and then transfer that mark onto the snap tape, choosing the side, not the fold. This way, when you attach the snap tape to the fabric, it will hang and the seam won't show. I'm using the little carriers, and the little carriers are going to help me determine where I want the snap tape to actually be at the top. So you use the carrier in the snap tape as a guide to determine how far down to place and sew the snap tape onto the header.
Once you've figured out the width of the snap tape needed for your Ripplefold drapery, you need to pin the two fabrics together. Fold the cut panel fabric down 2.5 inches and in half again to create the finished 1.25 inch header, and then apply the snap tape using the center top as the guide to positioning the tape. Pin it down, make sure that it's all nicely folded. I only folded the outer finished linen fabric down twice and cut out the blackout lining to reach the top of the folded panel. Otherwise, it would have made the header too bulky with the snap tape. Now I'm just pinning it down. Here you're just going to continue seeing me pin the snap tape down using the guides for the top part of the fold so that it looks really pretty and it hides. Next, we're going to show you in step 4 how to finish the end seams. Now I'm showing you the end seam. Oh, and if you haven't noticed, I'm not really wearing jeans. Those are actually my jean tool belt, but it keeps slipping because they used to be my husband's. To finish off the top header, you have to enclose the snap tape inside the side seam on both panel edges. The one I'm showing you right now is the section that goes towards the wall at the end of the panel. So whether it's the right or the left, this is a center opening and this is going to go against the wall. But if you notice here, if I used the blackout lining and tried to fold it, it was way too heavy. So instead, I trimmed the blackout lining to where I wanted the fold to go over, and then that way it wasn't going to be too bulky. Next, I folded the linen fabric and I pinned it to the snap tape. But before that, you want to make sure that the linen is holding down. It's a little fussy, so I finger press it, keep it down, and roll it as I can. Put the snap tape on, pin it down so that I know it's at the same distance as the other carriers, and then fold the linen fabric over top to give it a nice finished edge that will be seen, or not seen actually, against the wall when this is a completed finish. Step 5. Sewing on the blackout lining.
And keeping a slight tension both on the front and the back, not pulling, because you don't want to pull, because if you pull you might actually bend the needle, so you don't want to do that. But as you're sewing, I've got blackout lining underneath this corner sew. Right through here there's blackout lining that's been, I folded the linen fabric over top, so I've given it a nice clean edge. And by doing that, it's kept a nice seam, but you have to know that when you're working with a blackout lining, it's super heavy and it has a tendency to pull. So I'm using two totally different materials, meaning that I'm using a light linen, which is going to be the facing fabric, and then this heavy-duty blackout lining. And so that's a really strong non-stretch fabric. So I'm working with two different fabrics together. So it can be a bit of a challenge, but just use one for the other. Use the lining as the structure part to help keep your linen fabric from not moving around too much. And plus linens, or in some of the polyesters, fray a lot. So by doing this, you ensure that any sort of fraying is limited by doing a rolled hem, which is what I'm doing right now. And if you notice, this is super heavy, so whenever I'm sewing, I've got to make sure that the weight is being pushed forward, or else it's going to pull and I could break a needle. I could stretch and cause some more issues with my actual trim. And as you can see, if you take your pins out too early, your nice flat seam ends up not being so nice. So it's always good to kind of keep your pins in place until you get to them. But I was noticing that one was pulling and it was not quite centered, so I wanted to adjust it before I went any further. Trust me, it's better to do it right the first time than have to get all the way there and then have to take out stitches. Such a pain. Again, I'm just, even though I'm using a feeder foot, because it's so heavy, I am just gently holding so that it stays straight, so that I get a nice, clean, flat seam. Oh, I'm almost finished. Ay, ay, ay. I can hardly wait. This has been a long project. And hopefully it looks really good. I'd say it's kind of like IKEA. You know, when you make the first, whatever it is, bookshelf or desk or anything else, you should always do 2 or 3, because the first one's a learning curve. After that, piece of cake. Almost done. Oh my goodness. Oh, stop, you're getting excited. Kind of like a horse at the end of a ride and just wanting to go home. Okay, almost there. Almost there. Yay. Do not pull out pin. Do not pull out pin. Keep going. This is where the challenge always happens, is right at the top, especially when you're dealing with a stretchy fabric, is a lot of times the top wants to expand past the header. And after you've done all this wonderful work, you really don't want that to happen. So what I have a tendency to do is I want to scroll it back a bit, and meaning that I take the fabric and roll it back even though it's not level, so that when it stretches, now it'll be even. Does that make any sense? So here we go, done. So this is what the seam looks like on the inside, very clean, snap tape, as I'm making ripple folds, so you can see all the snaps. And then that's what the edge will look like. Now, you notice this is the butt side. So I gave the same distance to the end of the seam as what would be in the middle of the curve. So this is the butt part. So this is going to go like this and in the middle of my treatment. Okay, so it's extending past, and I've got about 3 and a bit inches all the way to the wall, but I've only done this, the same distance as the next curve would be when it's sitting up, just so that it looks kind of even. Anyway, that's what I've done. So we'll have to see how it turns out. Stay with me.